This is OFN NFL Preview for week number 10 in the 2020 NFL season, as the season hopefully will find a way to end. Mark Lawrence, how's everything going, Mark? You think we're going to get to a Super Bowl?
Well, the season's going to end, Greg. It's just a question of when. How many games will we get in?
Yeah.
These COVID cases are rearing their ugly heads, especially in college football, and it's not going to be long before it's the NFL. So I think that's a real good proposition wager is, will we play a full 16-week schedule in the NFL? And from what I understand, as far as the owners are concerned, absolutely they will. They'll bring players in off the street if they have to. They're not going to forsake any money, any revenues that they've already lost, and fold up the tent, if you will, per se. So while the product may diminish, the game will go on.
All right. Well, week 10 is upon us, and we have some good games to get into as always. First of all, last week we talked about a very interesting, I thought maybe it was a one-off trend, or we could call it a stat at the time, which was the fact that the teams that were winning in week 8 were not winning the total yards battle. But again, thought maybe that was a one-off. Well, apparently now it's a two-off, because teams winning the total yards battle are now 10-18 in the last 2 weeks. So that's it. That's very interesting. Now, maybe it's just a two-off, but it is very interesting that the teams that are winning the total yards battle are not winning the football games.
Well, that certainly puts pressure on the, if you will, the Bill Parcells bend but don't break rule, because that's what NFL football teams appear to be doing, is giving up yards in chunks but not breaking. Some people think it's a good thing. I think it's not a real good thing. I think it's an indicator of bad things to come. We'll find that out. All I do know is that teams who do make it to the NFL playoffs year in and year out have a propensity for winning the yards and the games as well, not going so much inside out, if you will. So we'll see if that trend doesn't, at least if it doesn't reverse itself, if the teams that are going to make the playoffs can stay true to winning the game and the yards.
Okay, let's kick off week 10 with the Thursday night game. This is one of the better games of the week, so good job putting this game on Thursday Night Football. And speaking about it, a backwards 2020 trend, the road team has won 5 out of 8 Thursday night football games and have covered 7 out of 8. So how about that?
That's the kind of year it's been, just things out of the norm, per se, if you will. And, to that I say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. For whatever reason, road teams have fared well on Thursdays, and I can attribute a lot of that to the lack of attendance on the home field side of the football games, of which we're seeing a lot of in the NFL this year. That's why underdogs are doing so well, because these home teams just flat out don't have a home field advantage. That could be one of the reasons these Thursday teams are doing so well.
All right. In this one, the Colts are currently they're a 1-point dog at Tennessee. And, Tennessee continues to look. This is whether you like them this week or like them during the season. We talked about them as a nice sleeper team, and they've made us look good, no question about it. But just like they were a nice sleeper team, they've kind of been, again, undervalued pretty much week to week. They're at home, which is, by the way, their 5th home game in six outings. That's crazy. 5 home games out of 6, but they're only a 1-point favorite. It's like the Pittsburgh game. They're a dog at home. It's just weird how they just don't get any respect. But still, even this is going to be the one time where I'm not going to back Tennessee under that scenario. Not only am I not worried about Indianapolis as a road Thursday game, we talked about that, but the Colts, they have really dominated the series. They've won 7 out of the last 8. And it's sort of like why the first game of the season I went with Jacksonville to upset the Colts, because Jacksonville had really done a good job in that matchup. And so these AFC South matchups, these division matchups, I kind of favor those a lot more than any other kind of trends that get thrown my way. That's the main thing I look at. If one team, and especially if they're pretty evenly matched like they are, and another they just have an edge for whatever reason psychologically that, hey, we're going to beat you because we've proven that we can beat you 7 of the last 8 times, that's the team I'm going to side with.
Well, when one team beats another team 2 or 3 times, it's one thing, but when they dominate them, it's another, and they end up holding the hammer, if you will, having the edge, the psychological edge in football games. You mentioned the short line in this football game, and it's largely due to the fact that Vegas loves the Colts, and they do not think much of Tennessee.
No.
So, and you got the Colts coming off that loss in their last football game here, hence the short number here. I can understand why they're going there. That and the fact that if you look at the Colts, the last 12 games, when they played on Thursday night road games, they're 10-2 against the spread. So they've traveled well on Thursdays themselves. They have. But we also point out that the Colts are one of only 2 teams in the league this year that have out-yarded 7 of the 8 opponents they played. That's a pretty strong stat. The other team happens to be New Orleans. So despite the fact that the Colts are coming off a loss, they're still getting the job done between the trenches on the field, and I think Vegas adheres and loves that as well.
Another couple of trends that work for the Colts. They're 9-1 against the spread their last 10 as a dog after they score 14 or less, and Tennessee 3-12 against the spread in their last 15 after they win a game by 7 or more points. The other thing that has nothing to do with trends, but you just look at what happened last week. Chicago, good defense, and they were able to stop Derrick Henry and make Tennessee one-dimensional. Tannehill made a couple of throws to Brown. That was the difference. It wasn't like Tennessee. Tennessee is very fortunate to score 24 points. I still don't know how they did it. Indianapolis has a real good defense. When Darius Leonard plays and everybody else is healthy, this is a really good defense. They showed it last week. If Ravens didn't get that 7 points on defense early, Colts were controlling the game. I think the Colts go on to win that football game. So unless Tennessee gets a couple of gifts as well, or they put some pressure on Rivers. By the way, Rivers he was not sacked last week, and he attempted 43 passes. So they have a good offensive line, as we know, Indianapolis. Plus, as you mentioned as well, Colts coming off a loss. This is a big game for the Colts. They don't want to get down 2 games in the standings to Tennessee. These 2 teams will play again in a couple of weeks in Indianapolis. In between those matchups, the Colts will host Green Bay next week, and Tennessee will be in Baltimore. So these 2 teams not only will be playing each other 2 of the last 3 weeks, but they have some big matchups next week.
Yeah, they do. Both teams have big matchups, but they can't get caught looking ahead here. We're at the stage of the football season right now where at the halfway point and beyond, every game becomes critical, and especially to teams that are jockeying for playoff position. Tennessee right now would be in the playoffs, so too would the Colts. So neither team wants to give up ground in that sense. So I don't think look-aheads will be a factor in this game.
All right, now let's talk about a big one out west in the NFC West, Seattle and the Rams. And Seattle coming off a loss. And by the way, I just think it's funny that for the second straight week, Seattle lost the total yards by 1 yard. So they of course I thought of you when that happened. They just love losing the total yards battle, especially if they can just lose it by 1 yard, just to make it official. But Seattle is a 1.5 point dog in LA. This is and LA has done pretty well in this series of late. They won 4 out of 5, covered 3 out of 5 versus Seattle, but they're just 4-15 against the spread in their last 19 as a single-digit home favorite. That's not really good. And then there's a bunch of other trends that do seem to favor Seattle, including Russell Wilson when he's a dog, and the team in general as a dog, because they're not dogs very often. They were a 1 point dog opening week against Atlanta. We know what happened there. Here they're 10, and that put them at 10-3-1 in their last 14 as a dog, as a road dog.
Well, this is a role I think that both Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll relish, and that's dressing up as an underdog. And when you can put them in this situation after what happened to them last week when they lost straight up on the road as a favorite, that's a nice role reversal that I can kind of wrap my arms around. This is all about Russell Wilson, and it's all about Pete Carroll and keeping this team avoiding losing 2 football games in a row. I know the defense is really, really shaky. Since the bye week, they've allowed 108 points and 1,290 yards. They're not getting any better defensively. They're going to have to in this football game somehow. But you're looking at the Seattle numbers here, pretty powerful, if you will. Russell Wilson, I think the key in this game is the fact that the Rams beat them the last time they played. And Russell Wilson does not get beat 2 times in a row very often. When he's seeking revenge coming off of a loss, he's 13-1 straight up and 10-1-3 to the spread in his career. So those are some pretty good Russell Wilson type numbers in the football game. I know the Rams have the advantage of an extra week to get ready for this game off of a bye week, but this is a situation that matters. And, football, handicapping football is all about the situation. And I think the situation here warrants a long look at Seattle.
And there were some bright spots for Seattle on defense, believe it or not. They had 7 sacks. Jamal Adams returned. Carlos Dunlap played. They both had sacks. So they're trying to get some. So and look, you even mentioned this last week on the show that sooner or later Seattle is not going to keep doing well in these East Coast games. It's just going to catch up to them. They're not perfect, and it wasn't like they had a great win. They didn't look all that great when they beat Miami in that game. They just won the game, and Miami wasn't playing all that great at that time. So I think it caught up to them. And also, as we mentioned last week, they took on a Buffalo team that had just beaten the Patriots. And would that kind of wake Buffalo up from their slumber? Because they weren't playing all that great. They didn't even play great when they beat the Patriots, but they found a way to beat them. And that seemed to have been exactly what they needed, because they just came out and looked like that they had a new lease on life. So I want to kind of give Seattle a little bit more time with their defense, because look, Miami's defense just went after Goff big time, as we know. And it was an ugly game for Goff in his last performance. Seattle can find a way to make him one-dimensional and have Goff throw the football, and they can get in his face. Then maybe their defense can be a little bit better, because we know Seattle's offense is still going to put points up on the board.
No question about it. I don't think they worry about the offense in Seattle any at all these days. The defense, obviously, the key question mark here. The truth of the matter is the Rams have some really, really good statistical numbers in this contest here. They're playing pretty well, about as any team in the National Football League, statistically at least. But again, this is a situation about Seattle and the role that they happen to be in. If you take a look at the Rams, one role that's horrible for them is if at home as a single-digit division favorite, laying less than 10 points. They're only 4-15 to the spread.
Yep.
Which means they leave the door open for their visiting division opponents when they're favorite at home, and that can't be a good situation in a football game like this. Now, I realize that there have been 6 quarterbacks that have thrown for 300 or more yards on the Seattle secondary here, and this is exactly what the game plan should be for Goff and Sean McVay, is to air this ball out and keep this secondary back on their heels in the contest. So, we'll see whether or not they can apply enough pressure. I think when you're handicapping quarterbacks and you're looking for handicapping a quarterback to either have a good or a poor performance, I don't see a good performance from Goff in this football game. I'm not a big Goff fan at all. I don't think he puts up big numbers, and I think he chokes in big games. This being a division game, I think that's all fits in the play here. Hence, I'll be on Seattle plus those points.
And here's a big one for the Rams that people might lose sight of. They are 4-0 this season against the NFC East. 4-0,
well,
again, which they should be. But the point is,
you take those 4 wins out. And what's their record? Right.
And they've only beaten one team at the time that was over 500, the Bears. That's it. So, they lose to San Francisco, they lost to the Dolphins, and they lost to Buffalo. And they were getting beat up by Buffalo at the time early, and they came back and almost stole that game. But look, we liked the Rams when they were 66-1 before the season, 71, whatever, because that number was too crazy. They were too talented for that. But they're not an elite team. They're just not. And Goff, as you mentioned, he's a big reason. He showed you in the Miami game that you put a little bit of pressure on him, and he's just not very good.
Exactly. You know what? And that goes back to the memories from the Super Bowl when he had that deer in the headlights look, and I don't see the look changing any at all too much after that since then.
Yeah.
He was really questionable as to whether or not he should have been a top pick in the National Football League draft to begin with. Heck, the kid had a losing record at California as a starter, so there was nothing there to wrap your arms around. He wasn't exactly Patrick Mahomes coming out of college football. So, that might have been a questionable draft selection by the Rams. They're living with it right now. There's no other reason, I think, for them to turn to a backup quarterback at this stage of the season because they're playing some decent football. So, but I don't believe the Rams win football games because of Goff, okay? They'll win football games for other reasons.
Yeah, the defense, plus they have to run the football. And
Yes.
I think they haven't done a good job of running the football lately. They must – the play action drives me insane. I mean, I don't think there's – I don't know what the stats are, but they have to be one of the leaders in play action because every single time Goff goes back to pass, it's play action. It's matter of fact, they pass the ball more than they run out of that set. It's like, dude, you're not fooling anybody because they can see – they're not dumb. They're looking at film. They know that you're not going to more than likely hand the ball off because you don't hand the ball off, 65 or 70% of the time that it looks like you're going to hand the ball off. So maybe if you actually ran the ball on first and second down one of these years, then the defense would go, hey, all right, maybe we'll respect them in play action on second down after you ran the ball on first.
Well, we as human beings, I think one fault we have is we tend to want to get comfortable. And that means falling into bad habits, doing just that. And that's a situation that applies in this case to Goff. You can predict exactly what play he's going to do, what he's going to run, and it probably has to stop at the coaching level. They got to put some better plays in there for him to not be able to audible off of. So, we're tearing him apart, maybe justifiably so or not. But again, I don't think he steps up in big games, and this is a big game.
Also, here's a really good one, maybe the best one for as we check out the Playbook magazine here, and you just open it up and you see here where they have the quarterly reports right here. The quarterly, we're into that third quarter right there. And games 9 through 12, Seattle. Now, this is just it. This is a very simple stat. Games 9 through 12, the last 40 games, Seattle is 31-9 against the spread. Okay?
Yeah, this is the time of the year they start cooking.
That's
unquestionably.
it. And on the flip side, games 9 through 12, the Rams 5-23 at home versus a team coming off a loss. So those two games 9 through 12 stats heavily favoring Seattle. Next week, the Rams are in Tampa Bay. They are 1-8 against the spread in their last 9 before they play a Monday Night Football game, including 0-1 this year.
Not a lot of good numbers in this game. It's like this game fits like a glove to Seattle. This would be our Johnny Cochran special, if you will, in that sense.
Yes. Boom!
With all these numbers lining up to Seattle. So, but I do like the reference, the third quarter reference for sure.
By the way, Seattle's also on prime time this week. They play Arizona at home on Thursday Night Football. So those two just played on prime time because they were moved to prime time because of a COVID deal, I think. But this one is an official Thursday night game. Okay, now speaking of Tampa Bay, love this one. I didn't even need to see the trends. And I knew I was taking Carolina in this one, especially after they almost beat the Chiefs once again when Teddy Bridgewater was getting points. So I'm like, okay, Christian McCaffrey's not playing. I don't care. Doesn't matter. It doesn't say Teddy Bridgewater and Christian McCaffrey. It just says Teddy Bridgewater as a dog. That's all it says. and Teddy Bridgewater is now, 22-4, I think, as a dog against the spread. How about this? Off a loss as a dog, he's 11-1 in his last 12. How about this? Carolina has covered 5 straight as a dog this year, and they have lost 4 straight by 8 points or less. Now, this is a 6.5 point spread, and I'm going to even give you another one that doesn't include Teddy Bridgewater. Carolina 18-4-1 against the spread as dogs, with revenge versus teams coming off a double-digit loss. I think Carolina, I'm just going to keep taking, like I've been doing for most of the season, I'm just going to keep taking Carolina when they're a dog.
Well, people are going to cry about no Christian McCaffrey, and he is a horse. There's no question about that. We saw that last week and what he means to the football team. But the fact of the matter is they've gotten along without him all season long up until last year. Okay.
Yes.
So it's not like they're going to be wallowing without Christian McCaffrey in the football game. My biggest concern here about Tampa Bay is this. One of these theories that we like to explore each week is looking to make a case for the team that was the NFL's most embarrassed team the week before to bounce back and wipe that egg off their face. There's no question who the most embarrassed team is.
That's true.
Is this week. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, can Tom Brady bounce back off his worst loss of his career?
Probably.
Bruce Arians the same way? Probably. Okay.
Yeah.
But the other side of the coin is this. They can win the football game and we can still cover the number, okay, in the contest with Carolina as the dog. So I'm going to stick with Teddy Bridgewater, his numbers. Matt Rule, I like him as a head coach. And fade Tampa Bay in this football game.
Now, here's another thing. A couple other quick things. We mentioned that they're playing the Rams next week on Monday Night Football at home. Their last 2 games were on primetime. Now they got to go to Carolina to take on a losing team that they beat easily by 2 touchdowns earlier this year. And that was actually the last time they lost as a dog, didn't cover as a dog, Carolina, and one of the very few times Bridgewater didn't cover as a dog. But they lost that game, but they beat that team at that point. And then now they got to go to Monday night next week. So they've got the 2 prime times. Oh, we got to go to Carolina this week. Then we got prime time LA next week. It's just crazy how many primetime games Tampa Bay's had recently. And this might be a good spot for Carolina to kind of sneak in. But like you said, the one difference is Tampa Bay is coming off the embarrassing loss.
Yeah, that's the concern in the football game, and you have to be aware of it. So, do you want to step in front of that if your handicap is to Carolina? If your handicap is to Tampa Bay, obviously you're going to use that as a weapon, and I would not disagree with that. But given the circumstances, the situation being all of everything that it is, you'll seldom find me fading Teddy Bridgewater in the role of an underdog.
And then lastly, the Tampa Bay Bucks, so far, right now, as of today, 0-1 with Antonio Brown in the lineup.
I like that. I like that stat.
by a 38-3 margin.
Wow, so Brown is minus 35 net points when he's been on the field. That's a pretty good stat.
Yeah.
We'll have to see. I don't think it'll sustain, but
no, I don't think so.
A good stat going in.
But I get the impression that if they lose this game, that there are going to be a lot of fans in Tampa Bay wondering whether or not that was a smart move. Because I'm sure there were a lot of fans wondering whether that was a smart move 3-4 weeks ago. So.
Well, you know what it does to me, Greg? It makes me wonder whether or not there was a riff in that locker room with his signing.
Yeah.
He's been a cancer everywhere that he's gone.
That's right.
And I realized Tom Brady took him in and tried to cultivate him. But you don't teach an old dog new tricks. And especially one with the character of an Antonio Brown. So maybe that was the problem in the football game. Everybody was not on the same page.
We don't
and
know.
If it happens, another poor performance here.
That's right.
That could be the end of Anthony Brown's best trend of the year that you just uncovered.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's get to Philly and New York. The Eagles are a 3.5-point favorite in this one. This is kind of a tricky one, even though the Eagles, there are a lot of positive trends that say Eagles, Eagles, Eagles. The thing that it's so interesting that they're 3.5 because Vegas is just they're just trying to entice you big time to take the Giants. 3.5. I could lose by 3, and I could still cover. So they got that half there, just dangling it right in front of you for very important reason. That's because, as I said, the trends heavily favor the Eagles. They've beaten the Giants 21 of the last 25 times they've played them. They've also beaten them 10 straight, covered 9 of the last 10 versus the Giants following a win. The Giants have dropped 8 straight covers as single-digit home dogs. And the Giants are 0-10 straight up, 2-8 against the spread in their last 10 as a dog following a win. There's just so many other things I just don't have time for that say Eagles, Eagles, Eagles. But that's why they're 3.5 to try to entice you. And look, the Eagles are only 1-5 as a favorite against the spread. This is probably the one team in the NFL that I don't want to lay points with, because they're just such a bad favorite. They're an ugly favorite. But the trends just tell you, and the history of this matchup says to go with the Eagles.
Well, I wouldn't disagree. Right now, this division, as we know, is up for grabs. Philadelphia sits on top, and they are arguably the best team in the division. Maybe not playing like that, but they've surfaced there right now for the moment. The other football teams that are in the hunt in the NFC East are in the hunt only because the Eagles haven't played up to their capability this year. Okay.
Yeah, if the Jets would have beat the Patriots on Monday and they were in the NFC East, they would be in the hunt.
Unbelievable. Okay.
Yeah, that's how sad this division is.
That's how bad this division is.
Yeah.
But it's still my belief that by the time the smoke clears, you're going to have Philadelphia in the playoffs coming out of this division here. Just too much talent and much, much better coaching on the Eagles side of the football. The one thing that should disturb the Giants the most is this. The last 10 times they've played Philadelphia, when the Giants are coming off a win and they've been the underdog, they've lost all 10 times. The last 10 times Philadelphia has taken on the Giants and the Eagles are coming off a win, they've won the game all 10 times. So you got a double 10 factor here working against the Giants in this football contest here. Then you've also got Daniel Jones coming off a clean game last week.
Yeah.
Which is
does
really,
that happen
really,
back-to-back games?
Yeah, I mean, my goodness. Can it happen back-to-back times? He's a human turnover machine. He's taken the place of Deshaun Kaiser in the National Football League, and they finally won a football game last week. 36 turnovers in 22 career games. That basically tells you why they're struggling with him at the quarterback position here. So I'm going to look at the better football team here. The Giants have lost 21 of the last 25 games in this series, and I don't see why they rise up in this football contest.
Yeah, look, there are a couple of landmines, and that is the fact that the Giants have covered 5 straight as a dog overall. They're 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 overall. The Eagles, as I mentioned, are 1-5 against the spread. Their last 6 as a favorite overall. And these two teams just played a few weeks ago, and the Eagles won by 1 point. Game 7 is a 5-point favorite and shouldn't have won the game. Giants should have beat them. They just couldn't close the game. Eagles were very lucky to win that game. So there are, like I said, that's the reason why if this was a different team, I'd probably be a lot more on the Eagles, but it's the Eagles and they concern me. By the way, the Eagles better win this game because their next 5 opponents are all winning teams.
Wow.
So they better get they better make sure they win this. If not, it's going to be a free-for-all in this division.
Yeah, they can't afford a loss here. Right.
No. All right. Also, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, the undefeated Steelers, barely getting by Dallas, and now they're an 8.5-point favorite in this one against Cincinnati. Now, we really liked Cincinnati the last time we saw the Bengals before the bye in their upset over Tennessee, and since they looked so good in that one, and since the Steelers looked so bad as a heavy favorite last week, I'm not so sure why I would stay away from Cincinnati in this one. They're 6-1-1 against the spread on the season. They've covered 14 of the last 20 as a road dog. They've covered 8 of the last 9 as a road dog of 7 or more points. And Pittsburgh, right now, they are dominant in this series. They've won 10 straight. They've covered, I believe, 6 out of 10. There's a tie in there. But that when you're undefeated like we saw last week, and then you start playing teams like the Bengals and the Cowboys, and next week they get the Jags, and then you come off of these really big games like they've had recently. It's just natural that you're going to kind of come down, and maybe that they did come down and barely win. That could be a negative because maybe they're thinking, oh, you see, we can pull this out in the fourth quarter against the Bengals too.
I think this game's got a big-time trap written on it for Pittsburgh here. I realize it's a division game and they should not be letting down, but they're 8-0 for the first time in their franchise history, which means they've never been this far before. It's an old Conway Twitty song, by the way. And having never been this far before, now they're laying points to a division rival who's played some pretty gutsy football, scrappy football because of their quarterback, Joe Burrow. There's new life in Cincinnati these days. What I don't like here, what I saw last week, was Mike Tomlin and the coaching mistake that he made, which could have turned out to have been a real disaster at the football game. He had the ball 4th and 1 at the Dallas 15 with 43 seconds remaining, winning 24-19. And instead of kicking the field goal, he opted to go for it, was stuffed, and he gave the ball back to Dallas with enough time, 43 seconds, to go down the field and beat him.
Yeah.
That should never have happened.
Did
Never.
he explain what his thinking was? Because I can only imagine it was, I don't want to give up the block field goal for a touchdown, which statistically just doesn't ever happen.
No, it's like betting on a safety, okay?
Yeah.
It flat out rarely ever happens. There was no excuse that anybody was going to buy in that situation here. So, that was a gaffe on his part, and he got away with it. He can't continue to keep making those gaffes if his football team wishes to remain undefeated on the football season here. You got a real hungry dog here in Cincinnati who has, like I said, played some pretty good football. They're 8-1 to the spread as road dogs of 7 or more points, which they fit real nice into this role here.
Yep.
Now, Ben Roethlisberger, his iffy condition, as we speak and do the show today, is down to -7 on Pittsburgh.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, we kind of want to get in on this at +7 or more with Cincinnati here.
Yeah.
But if Big Ben is announced to play, we're going to see this number go back to where it was to begin with. Regardless, the bottom line to me is this. In my database, NFL football teams who start out 7-0, in game 8, when they're playing a football team that, like Cincinnati, that's coming off a loss, they have never covered the spread. It's happened 9 times, and they've lost the spread all 9 times. So you got Pittsburgh here pushing the envelope right now for this perfect season, coming off a football game that they squeaked out against the Dallas Cowboys last week. And you got a football team here that you take a look. When they played their win over Baltimore, they were out-yarded 236 yards in the contest. That was a chink in the armor for an undefeated football team. They struggled after that chink in the armor last week, and until they can prove to me different, I'm going to continue to fade the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, matter of fact, one of the trends I noticed at Playbook newsletter this week, 8-0 teams are 3-11 against the spread since 1991, taking on teams coming off a win.
Yeah, when I said 7-0, I meant 8-0. So an 8-0 football team in Game 9, those are all the bad numbers against Pittsburgh in this particular role. So regardless of how you shake it, it's the same theory in college football. The longer you go into the season undefeated, the tighter and tighter the noose gets.
Yep.
Because you're under pressure, you're likely to choke, and the other team is coming with everything they've got to spoil the party. And it's a division rival like Cincinnati is. You can expect a big effort from them in a football game like this, and I do just that on Sunday.
And the other thing is, even though it's a division rival for Pittsburgh too, they've beaten this team pretty easily the last 10 times they played them. So this is not, they're not worried like psychologically about this team. This team doesn't worry them. So it might be and look, if Big Ben doesn't play for whatever reason, that spread is what, 3 points?
Well, right now, the spread has come
There's no
down.
way with Mason Rudolph they should be a 7-point favorite. And if they are, then I'll take an that to the bank.
And they won't be, okay? Yeah. When and if it's confirmed that Big Ben's not there, they're going to probably go off at like 4.5 or 5 points.
Okay.
But right now it's down to 7, sitting there waiting, which way to go. Am I going to go up or am I going to go down here?
Okay.
So, to me, if you like Cincinnati, I think you take the 7 right now. And then if the number gets bigger, you go back and strengthen your position with a better number later in the week.
And by the way, Joe Mixon, it's a key loss for them. I'm surprised he's not ready to come back yet. He hasn't practiced yet, as far as I know. I don't know if he's practiced today, but that would be, they got away with it against Tennessee, but Pittsburgh's a better team, or at least they've shown that they're a little bit better for the most part against the run. Okay, primetime games, Baltimore and the Patriots. It's never good when your starting quarterback comes out in an interview and says that the opposition is calling out our plays. But that's what Lamar Jackson's saying regarding Greg Roman's play calling, and I'm sure he probably was told after the interview, you shouldn't really be saying that. You're dissing your offensive coordinator, especially in Baltimore, because they really didn't like the way that Greg Roman called the playoff game last year. So he's already on the hot seat for the fans' sake, and they're winning, but they're kind of winning ugly now, and they're taking out a Patriot team that, yes, they were able to get a win over the Jets, and that was nice. A win's a win. They broke their 4-game losing streak. I think the most important thing about that one was the fact that Cam Newton looked more comfortable. It had nothing to do with who they were playing, because Cam looked terrible in his previous few games. His footwork was awful. He was all out of whack. So it was very important for him to look comfortable in the system that he's playing this year. And if he can continue to do that, they may have a shot in this game. And I know Bill Belichick has all these historical dog records at home, but this is just a different team. I mean, this is Cam Newton. This is a team that's not very good compared to all those other teams. So I just have a hard time worrying too much about the historical trends with this one, but it's still kind of hard to give up 7 points to a Bill Belichick team when he doesn't have to go on the road.
Yeah, that's the key. They're playing this game in Foxborough, and they haven't fared all that well in Foxborough this year. So he wants to right that wrong. And what better place to do it against the Baltimore Ravens? The Ravens are 6-2 this year. They were exactly 6-2 at the same spot last year. The big difference is, if you take a look at their numbers, their offense is down 68 yards a game. Their defense is down 25 yards a game. This is not the same Baltimore Ravens team, even though their record says it is. And a lot of that is because of this lack of spark from the offense. Now, Lamar Jackson, as you mentioned, spoke out about that. Probably not the wise thing to do. So will we see a change in the philosophy from Greg Roman in this football game? Hard to say. But until I see it, I'm like from Missouri, you got to show me, you got to prove it to me. I'm going to stay with New England in the football game. As much a play on Bill Belichick as it is against Baltimore, who is not hitting on all cylinders.
First time the Patriots are a home dog since 2014. And Belichick is 14-3-1 against the spread as a home dog with the Patriots. So we'll see whether or not that can continue without Tom Brady. By the way, Calais Campbell will miss the game for the Ravens. So Calais Campbell's out. You have their top offensive tackle out for the season, the Ravens as well. We'll see what happens here. This is it for the Patriots. If they lose this game, they're done. They're not making them a right, because they're already chasing 4 teams for the final playoff spot. They can't afford to lose this game at all. So if they lose, they're done. And maybe that's important to know, that you're going to get maximum effort from a team, because they don't always give maximum effort. You're going to get maximum effort from the Patriots against the Baltimore offense that is just trying to find themselves. So who knows? Maybe not a bad idea if you're looking at outright upset picks this week.
Yeah, I think it's one of the plays that you got to look at a money line for that possibility, for all the aforementioned reasons that we talked about. And how wrong can you be not backing Bill Belichick to win a football game at home? It's where he's made his most success doing just that. Now you got an underdog role, so you can play him as a dog and on the money line. And I don't think you'll do any worse than splitting those two bets. Finally,
on Monday Night Football, how about this? The Minnesota Vikings are now 3-5. Now they're in the NFC, so they have a much better chance of making a run to get back into the playoff race. Their next 3 games are all at home against Dallas, Carolina, and Jacksonville. They have 3 losing teams at home. If they can beat the Bears, they have a chance to turn their record around to 7-5. and they're right there with a shot. At 6-6, they might have a shot, and but this is not a good spot for them because they've dropped 10 straight covers as a Monday Night Football road team. I mean, that's pretty bad. The Bears, meanwhile, have won 4 straight against Minnesota, yet they're the home dog on national TV. And you got a Bears defense that shut down Derrick Henry last week. So if he could shut down Dalvin Cook, we know if you can make Kirk Cousins the guy that has to beat you, you're in good shape. And that's been what's happened. And that's why Chicago's won this series 4 straight times. In 3 games against Dalvin Cook, they've held him to 39 yards rushing or less in all 3.
I look at the win-loss record between these two teams and ask myself, why is Minnesota favored in the football game? Okay,
yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot of love for Chicago, and suddenly there is for Minnesota, off of a couple of wins, and all of a sudden everybody wants to get on, hop on this football team here. You still have a top 10 ranked defense in Chicago, and in those games that Minnesota has lost, the 10 in a row on Monday nights, they only won 1 of them on the scoreboard.
Wow.
So it's not like, it's not like they were close calls as favorites and didn't get the money down. They just flat out haven't played well. But I think the killer trend of the week is inside this football game. And we put it as our incredible stat of the week in the Playbook Football Newsletter, and we'll share it with all of the viewers on this show here today. And what it is simply is the Chicago Bears, when they're home underdogs, they're coming off back-to-back losses, and they're taking on an opponent who's off a win. The Bears are 17-1-1 against the spread in this role. That's the role they'll dress up here as a Monday night division home dog with a better record. I don't think I have to say anything more on beyond the Chicago Bears in this game.
You can just drop the mic if you'd like then, Mark. There you go. All right. So that was the first thing that I said. Wow, I know we all understand why Minnesota's the favorite, because if the season started today and they were all 0-0, you'd go, yeah, Minnesota's a better team. So we get it, but that's just not the way it is. There's reasons why teams lose, and there's reason why teams win. And when teams find ways to win and teams find ways to lose, there are reasons for that. And sometimes it's just not all statistics. Sometimes it's just, Nick Foles stinks, or they can't do this right, or they can't do that right. Dalvin Cook has made the Vikings forget all about how bad Kirk Cousins can be in this spot. Well, if they stop Dalvin Cook on Monday night, you going to trust Kirk Cousins?
Well, then Kirk Cousins is alone on an island is really what it comes down to, because it's Dalvin Cook that's made him look decent the last 2 football games, obviously, because the offense spreads out and he's got a much better rushing and passing attack doing just that. So will Dalvin Cook have 3 consecutive good football games in a row against a defense that's 78 yards a game better than Minnesota's? I'm going to say no. All
right, Mark. Great job as always. Playbook.com. Don't forget that's where you want to go, because that's where you can do all your shopping. You have the coffee club email that comes out every day. You have the newsletter that comes out every week, the midweek newsletter that comes out as well. So much to choose from, so much to take it. I mean, you just have to. If you're somebody that handicaps games, you need to gamble on games, fantasy as well. It's all valuable. I mean, you're crazy not to check out playbook.com.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not crazy, and I check it out. So
there you go.
Yeah, so too should all of the viewers to the show.
So you say.
Yeah, so I say.
Yeah. All right, Mark, we'll see you again next week, week 11 in the NFL.
Thank you, Greg.